I was trying to come up with a good pun for this, and unfortunately, I just didn't have any tricks up my sleeve. Prestige stars Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale as a pair of magician's assistants who work together and are regularly coached by their mentor, played by Michael Caine. After a tragic accident ends their act and turns them into bitter rivals, they each begin their own magic careers. While initially fueled by their own ambitions, that ambition soon becomes obsession as they constantly try to find ways to sabotage each other's acts, as well as ruin their lives. Welcome back to my Christopher Nolan series. For those who are new here, I'm going through each of Christopher Nolan's movies and reviewing them one by one in order of release date. This was originally supposed to be a lead up to Tenet, but with the news that Tenet's indefinitely delayed, I'm just going to go over what's already out and we'll circle back to Tenet as well as my ranking of each of Nolan's films when that time eventually comes. I've already covered 4 of Nolan's movies and I'll leave links to that playlist in the description in case you missed any of them, but we have 5 movies to go after this, and to stay up to date with those reviews, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can catch them as soon as they're out. But now, let's talk about Nolan's 5th movie, The Prestige. I will preface this with what I also said about Memento. I'm not going to explicitly spoil anything. However, this is a movie that's best experienced going in completely blind. That was what I did with this movie as well as Memento. And while this became pretty much the Christopher Nolan gold standard after The Dark Knight, it applies to pre-Dark Knight movies as well. So while this is a spoiler-free review, if you want to know absolutely nothing, I would suggest watching the movie first, then coming back to this. But anyway, here we go. It's actually kind of funny. You often don't find movies centered around magicians, but this was released in 2006, and we ended up getting not 1, not 2, but 3 movies about magicians. This, The Illusionist, and Scoop, the latter of which also starring Hugh Jackman, as well as Scarlett Johansson, who's in this film as well. Funny how that goes. This did fairly well at the box office and received positive reviews, but despite audiences loving this movie, myself included, it actually didn't fare as well with critics as Nolan's previous movies, besides Following. It's funny, Insomnia is critically acclaimed, and people forget about it. This, people love, critics aren't gushing over it. There's sometimes a really weird disconnect between critics and audiences, I gotta say. This is also Nolan's last movie before The Dark Knight. Batman Begins is definitely a game changer in terms of how Batman was portrayed on screen, as well as starting a trend of gritty reboots of popular franchises, but that wasn't what made Nolan this household name. That would be The Dark Knight. So while he is a highly respected director by this point, especially in independent circles, this is the last movie before everyone really knew the name Christopher Nolan. It's the last movie to date that David Julian, who scored most of his previous movies, worked on. Hans Zimmer scores all of his films after this. Also, it's the last movie to date where his budget was under $100 million, which is funny because now he says he's making something and he can be as secretive as he wants and studios will just throw money at him. So it's funny he's still on something of a lower budget here, and I use that term loosely. I mean, it was still $40 million. But that doesn't make it any less enjoyable than his later efforts. In fact, I think this is a great movie, and for the longest time, this was probably my favorite Nolan movie after Memento. Having sat down to rewatch this recently, my feelings are slightly different, but I still hold that it's a very strong movie and highly entertaining. While Nolan co-wrote the screenplay with his brother Jonathan, this is actually not an original story, but in fact an adaptation of a 1995 novel of the same name. I haven't read it, it's supposed to be good. I don't know if there are supposed to be a lot of key differences. Nolan told the actors to not read the book when preparing for this. By the way, Christian Bale ignored that advice. So I don't know if that means anything. But either way, it's a very engaging movie. What really draws you in is the fact that it goes to great lengths to give off that feel of wonder and awe that you would see at a magic show. Even when the setting isn't on the theater stage, everything about it feels theatrical. We get that in the opening minutes, with Michael Caine giving a little speech explaining how every magic trick is set up. And he says it with this sense of grandeur as he performs a small magic trick for a little girl. And right there, that sets the tone for the entire movie. Nolan presents this as if we're watching one long magic show. When a magician performs, the setup for each trick is first the pledge, in which a seemingly real situation is set up, then it's followed by the turn, in which it's challenged, and then there's the prestige, where all is set right again. And at the beginning of this movie, not too long after Caine's speech, we're presented with a very drastic situation, which I won't reveal, even though it is at the beginning, but that's our pledge. And now we're spending the movie figuring out how this happened and trying to put the pieces together, which is the turn. And the third act presents us with the prestige, showing what was behind said event at the beginning. Nolan once again utilizes something he's very well known for at this point, being non-linear storytelling. He cuts back and forth between a few different time periods. We'll see the aftermath of the event that represents the pledge. We then cut to Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman as they're still assistants, and then we also cut to when they're both well into their careers, and it does cut back and forth between all 3 of those time periods. And once again, he does a great job presenting us with an intriguing and engaging narrative. At first though, the jumping around can be a bit disorienting because this is the most the story moves back and forth between time periods within Nolan's movies. There are a lot of layers, and since you're jumping around 3 different time periods, sometimes it isn't exactly clear at first where you are in the timeline. So it may be a rough first few minutes for you if you're trying to keep track of what's going on. But interestingly enough, he doesn't stick with the non-linear storytelling for the entire movie. After the first half hour or so, he shifts towards keeping things chronological, for the most part. Once he does that, the movie picks up exponentially, and it becomes easier to start keeping up with all these moving parts. But this is a pretty bold movie, and at times a lot of fun. 2 big themes this leans into are obsession and sacrifice. Jackman and Bale are out to get one another, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to outdo each other. This is filled with a lot of twists and turns at every corner. Everything is laced with trickery, and it moves at an incredibly fast pace. It runs at 2 hours and 10 minutes, and once you get over that initial disorientation, it's never boring. Your mind's constantly working, trying to put all the pieces of this puzzle together. We'll see things from Bale's point of view, and then we see things from Jackman's point of view. You have scenes like these 2 characters personally showing up and sabotaging each other's shows. They'll give someone else false information to pass along to one another. They'll see what tricks they're performing at each other's shows and try to go even bigger with them for their own performances. This is what consumes them. Every action and every conversation is fierce, passionate, dramatic, heart-racing, sometimes all that combined. This even comes down to just the mundane conversations. There's a scene early on where Jackman is trying to get help from Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie, and his assistant, played by Andy Serkis, greets him at the gate. And instead of keeping it a straightforward conversation, he begins to have some fun with him and he makes him guess what's in his hand. It's a small moment, but it just best exemplifies how every conversation just feels so grand and theatrical. The tone is so easily maintained, not just thanks to Nolan's direction, but also thanks to the casting. Hugh Jackman was specifically cast by Nolan for having the qualities of stage showmanship, and you can tell it exudes him every moment he's on screen. Maybe that's why so many people love him in Greatest Showman. I wouldn't know. Still haven't seen that movie. But Jackman is a phenomenal actor. I've said this when I reviewed Bad Education earlier this year. He can just come off as a naturally likable guy, even when he's playing someone who's really not the greatest. He's charismatic, he's a smooth talker, he knows what to say, and it's sometimes easy to forget just how ridiculously talented he is, especially when his main job was playing Wolverine for over 15 years. But seeing him in action here, we get someone whose every line of dialogue and every moment feels theatrical, but he finds a way for it to translate so well into film, and it's truly mesmerizing stuff. Christian Bale is also excellent. I'd say he has the most chaotic performance of everyone. He has some marriage troubles. His wife, played by Rebecca Hall, is frustrated with him because he never acts the same way from day to day. His personality is very unpredictable, but one thing that's consistent is he very much enjoys messing with Hugh Jackman. There are times where it seems like he has the upper hand, and it bothers the living hell out of Jackman, like if he doesn't know how Bale's performing a certain trick. And when we cut back to Bale, we see him relish in it, so that was a lot of fun. Rebecca Hall also does an excellent job here. Her role is brief but challenging as she has to deal with Bale's constantly shifting demeanor. One day it seems like all is well, and the next he couldn't be bothered with her, and it constantly goes on, especially as he gets closer with Jackman's former assistant, played by Scarlett Johansson, and it ends up tearing Rebecca Hall apart. And the way it wears down her mental health is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the film. This was only her second movie, and she does a great job here. She is a very talented actress. Bowie and Serkis don't get as much to do. They're fun to see in the limited amount of time given to them. Serkis gets in a few jokes, and they're mainly just there to provide assistance to Jackman. He visits them a few times throughout the movie, and that's about it really. Johansson also does a good job getting caught in the middle of this escalating feud between Jackman and Bale. She tries going along with it at first, but you can see how it begins to bother her, and it affects her relationship with both magicians. So there was some nice drama that stems from that. Michael Caine provides the moral center for this, even though he spends much of the movie around Jackman. Seeing him on screen always felt like a comforting experience. He channels a lot of that same energy he used to play Alfred in the Dark Knight trilogy. He's always the voice of reason, he's giving advice, and there was this genuine sense of worth exuding from him. It's actually funny. Caine just feels so in his element here that it was thought the role was written specifically for him, but Nolan cleared it up and said it wasn't. Could have fooled me though. It couldn't be any more of a perfect fit. This was very well written and well acted all around, and despite the fact that it's filled with a lot of twists and turns, it doesn't lose its rewatch rewatch value once everything's revealed. In fact, I'd say this gains plenty of rewatch value, because once you see what's actually going on, you realize that there were a lot of hints and clues, sometimes in plain sight, that were planted throughout the entire movie, and it's a lot of fun going back and trying to figure out where those clues were. The only thing I'll say as far as stuff you'll pick up on during multiple viewings, having seen this a number of times, something that didn't really sink in with me is that you're so caught up in the wonder of the trickery and the conniving back and forth between Jackman and Bale, but I would have liked to have seen more of what these two guys were like outside of their obsession with one another. It never clicked with me for the longest time that you really don't know much about them otherwise. A lot of this movie is spent with both Jackman and Bale doing pretty horrible things to not just each other, but to everyone else around them, isolating other people and cutting off relationships. I said in my Insomnia review that Al Pacino's character there is one of Nolan's most unlikable protagonists, but Jackman and Bale might just have him beat. Because the acting is so great and because they both have these very charismatic personalities, you aren't able to get invested in them. But you do find yourself saying after a certain point, I'm rooting for these guys, but they're both kind of terrible people. We don't spend that much time with them before the incident that starts their rivalry. I would have liked to have seen more there, because then it makes their obsession with one another feel even more tragic. We could have seen very likable people become very unlikable people. And even in between some of their magic shows, there was more we could have seen there. Like, the Rebecca Hall subplot could have been explored a lot more. I stand by that she did a great job and her character isn't unlikable by any means, but they don't introduce that storyline until quite some time in, and we don't cut to it as often as we probably should have. Her and Bale have a great relationship when they first meet, and they get along very well, but it's not until well into the movie where this subplot starts that they're having marital troubles. And I would have liked to have seen more of that. I still really enjoy the movie. Like I said, the acting's great, pacing's quick, and the fun back and forth between Bale and Jackman makes this worth watching. I just think we could have seen more of what made these guys originally likable. That would have gone a long way. This was great. Is it Nolan's absolute best? Not at all. However, it's a really thrilling experience that captures the wonder and awe of an actual magic show. It's full of twists, turns, trickery, deceit. Nolan's direction is once again on point, the script is fast moving, and it's a lot of fun. Plus, it has some very good performances, especially from Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman, Rebecca Hall, and Michael Caine. And those performances make up for the fact that some of these characters aren't exactly the most likable, and it allows you to still be invested in what they do. It has plenty of rewatch value, and overall is another fantastic entry from Nolan. The Prestige gets an 8.5 out of 10. Up next, it's everyone's favorite Nolan movie, one of the biggest game changers in both the superhero genre and the film industry in general, The Dark Knight. Expect my review for that by the end of the week. I'll probably have one or two quicker reviews of 2020 movies in between, but stay tuned. So let me know, did you see The Prestige, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy the story? Did you like it as much as Nolan's other movies? And do you have a favorite magician in real life? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.